thing I've told students who have experienced difficulties with whether it's at home or at school, I tell them when they go out and they start listening to other students explain their situations, they're going to realize what they're experiencing is nothing in comparison to what other students experience. But more importantly, I tell the students when you stay in your dorm room, all that negative energy stays in that room with you. When you get out, that negative energy disappears and the positive energy comes out.
Welcome to another episode of The Man Space. It is an absolute delight and honor for me and my co-host Marquese to have these conversations week after week, to bring impactful, meaningful dialogue to men in a way that we are creating a safe place and a space for men to show up and explore the challenges they're facing at a day and an age where the pendulum has swung to a certain extent in the other direction, that men don't feel they have a safe place and a space. And it's important for women to be allies in this process, because just as much as male allies were necessary for women's empowerment movement to flourish, we as women allies need to show up to hold space for men. Because if we start thinking about every man as our father, our brother, our son, our nephew, right? We tend to look at things very differently, and we give them the opportunity to think of us and see us as their mother, their sister, their aunt, their niece, their daughter, right? So it works both ways. And from that safe place, today we are going to kick off a conversation. And Marquese, do you have any thoughts to add before we bring in our amazing guest, Professor Karl Kern?
No, I'm super excited. I don't want to get in the way. I look forward to chiming in and hearing all Professor Karl's going to share with us. So let's go for it.
Beautiful. So Karl, I am going to start with you sharing some of your experiences as a male professional and an educator in the second act of your life. We all have more than one act. What does that feel like and some of the challenges you're facing? And then through dialogue, we'll build on the rest.
First, I want to thank you, Dr. Cass, for having me on the podcast. And Marquese, it's great to be with you too, my friend.
Thank you.
What I'd like to discuss today is what I've been experiencing over the last 12 months. I consider myself in the third act of my professional life. I began as an accountant in private industry. I then moved to my own practice. Now my third act has been as an educator. I have been an adjunct and a visiting professor over the last 17 years. Well, over the last few years, it's been my desire to obtain a permanent position in a college or university here in the United States. Well, I've ran into some difficulty, and as recently as 2 weeks ago, I received my fourth rejection for a permanent teaching position over the last 12 months, 3 in the last 6. And what I'd like to just talk about in this episode is what I've been going through, but more importantly, how I'm responding, because there is a significant takeaway that I would like our audience to get in terms of how to begin the response. And that's where I'm going to leave it right now. And I'm going to open the floor to you, Dr. Cass, and to you, Marquese.
Thank you for setting that up, Professor Karl. We are living in an age where in the United States, the youth population is declining. So admissions into the United States is shrinking. And then to that, the unforced errors of our environment and our public policy makers is there is no research grants, there is no funding, there is no international student population. And for the audience who don't understand what that means, international students pay 3 times the in-state student tuition so that every international student can sponsor 2 in-state students. And so international students are not just coming here to study, they are contributing to our GDP, paying taxes, and giving scholarships to local young people who need to get the education. So this perfect tsunami and the confluence of events are pushing universities to downsize. I just read last week, Cornell has 600 faculty and administrators taking early retirement, and there's going to be much more being let go. ACBSP, the accrediting body for School of Business, had projected about 10% of universities shutting down even before any of this, just because of the decline in population. And so keeping that in context of reality, what are some of the solutions you are thinking of, Professor Kern, that people can look at? And as men navigating this in their third act, people might have the perception that you're not modern enough to show up in a modern AI-enabled classroom. So talk about the cusp of those two.
Well, first and foremost, I have found to talk to people. Dr. Cass, I speak to our mutual friend. And if it wasn't for our mutual friend, we wouldn't have met, which means I would not have met Marquese. So that means it would not give me an opportunity to be on the podcast that you produce. Also, what I've been finding by talking to people, I've actually found it therapeutic because our mutual friend and other friends of mine are more upset about my situation than I am. They've been asking me, have you been getting feedback? Why is this happening? I don't understand this. Well, I'm finding with their feedback, it's making me realize that it's not me. There's something else. And it's one thing that I've expressed often. It's just not the right place for me or the right time for me. So, how I'm responding is I'm just working on what I consider myself being blessed with, and that's my ability to connect with students. So, I'm still active on the adjunct teaching area. And in terms of AI, I've recently talked to a very good friend of mine who's been giving me some advice on how to use various AI platforms. So I've been using them far more often. But most importantly, it's talking to people, being able to learn from them, listen to their experiences, and take their advice so that I'm able to be the person who I'm being called to be. And that is the educator who is able to give students that safe space and let them see the greatness that lies in them.
That's good. One of the things that, Carl, that you were talking about is leveraging your friends and making that connection. As I was listening to you, one of the thoughts that came up is, number one, in this particular day and age, how beautiful it is you have friends not only cheering for you, but that you go to in this unfamiliar season that are supporting you. Because according to some recent research, only 15% of men have close friends they can actually go to when things are difficult. And that makes it increasingly more interesting for us to be able to do that. But I like they're also availing resources to you to help you and grow and expand. And the reason I find that beautiful is with your relationship with students, like that's one of your strengths, you're able to build that rapport, is that in business, we talk a little bit about companies are willing to spend 31 to 50% more to do business with people they trust for the same product. I appreciate and I'm excited to see how you navigate this because of your awareness of the rapport, which is what trust is all about. I'm intrigued to understand how that's shifting or shaping things for you differently, because you're bringing something to the room that AI can't replace, right? You're bringing this connection because universities want people not only to enroll, but to stay enrolled, because that's how they make their money, obviously. So your unique positioning is an art almost, because with the declining relationships and closeness, meaning we don't establish those things, you're aware of it and you're implementing it. So I'm curious to see what that's going to be like for you. Have you seen any progress or what is showing up for you as you start to fine tune the thing that you do or your greater strength?
Well, one thing that I am finding from talking to friends, and I'm receiving a lot of encouragement from this, is to be able to continue my work as an accountant outside the classroom so I can bring the on-the-job experience. And in talking to people in terms of what I want to do, which is bringing a systematic approach to accounting as a part of the whole, and how that part is going to be more people-centric, but more how to use technology as a strengthening element to the person-to-person connection. I'm getting a lot of positive feedback. And Dr. Cass, I think you'll like this one. I've told friends of mine on how I discovered that cost accounting. I want to demonstrate how it can bring a personality to a company. And I've gotten some smiles on that one. And I said, I'll explain it in more detail in time. But Marquese, it's really being able to take what I've done in private industry, private practice, and what I've taught in the classroom, and be able to put a human side to it, and
Yes.
letting students know that what you're learning from me is about who you are as a person. And you've seen that with my LinkedIn post. It's not about the grade, it's not about the award, it's not about the internship. It's about the personality traits that are going to make the students who I've been so blessed to have leaders of tomorrow.
That's, I absolutely love what you just said, Carl, because part of our responsibility as practitioners and educators is to lead by example, demonstrating that the human intelligence is leading the artificial intelligence, and the artificial intelligence is the tool. But
right.
that tool comes with biases and limitations and lack of perspective taking. And the wisdom of the human is what needs to be transferred, because learning is about knowing how to learn and knowing how to take perspective. Whereas AI is only teaching them that there are answers and how to go find answers in the context of biases and lack of perspective taking, right? Because it's only backed by the database it's being taught from and conditioned from.
Yeah.
So when you start thinking about how you can demonstrate to people, whether they're businesses or universities, how can you let the businesses pull this character trait from future employees and therefore kind of influence the universities to go there? Because universities are more apt to shifting if the marketplace wants it. But if we as professors want it, it is not regarded as actual valid input because we're pushing it, whereas the employers pull it, right? So what are your thoughts on creating that pull mechanism using your business alliances and bringing your wisdom into the classroom?
Well, the big thing that's really been my focus now, and it's actually started with a conversation with two colleagues a couple of years ago on how AI is changing what we want students to take in terms of skills. One of my colleagues talked about the importance of public speaking, being able to express oneself verbally. I took it a step further and I came up with a label called to have students become intuitive artists, how to use their instincts to be able to see if the output coming from AI makes sense instinctively, but be able to use a creative mindset where using the tool of AI can do the quote of grunt work, but being able to free ourselves and bring out the personality traits that allow for the creativity, whether that person is courteous, whether that person is energetic, whether that person is humble, but most importantly, digging deep in oneself to bring the personal traits that ultimately lead to the creativity and innovation that our institutions so sorely need.
Good. Yeah, that's very interesting. I'm looking forward to hearing and understanding it more. You start researching, like, oh, you looked that up. Can you repeat the term again, just so that we have clarity around it as you were describing
I
it?
call it, Marquese, the intuitive artist, the person who is going to use instinct to recognize whether what is being received from artificial intelligence makes sense, but more importantly, being able to free one's time to think creatively, act creatively, but something that you and I have talked about a lot, Dr. Cass, interact creativity. So it brings out the best of individuals that make them themselves. Because I couldn't last year, Marquise, a little bit of background, one of the schools I taught, I began posting stories about students.
Mhm.
Just my way to show the talent that they have. Well, it caught on, and it came up, it was labeled a student spotlight series. I never came up with a name, but I want to be able to students to recognize that what makes them is what's inside them, so they can bring out those traits in a creative manner that can ultimately lead to interaction that makes the team stronger, which is a big thing that I've been focusing on, is systematic thinking or synthesis, how the parts connect to the whole, and how you just keeping it to the ultimate, and that is how a company ultimately improves society. So it's a lot of nerdish things that I am getting into.
Yeah.
But the fundamental element is being able to recognize that we as people need to be looking at ourselves more at who makes us us. And Dr. Cass, Marquise and I were talking earlier about, Marquise asked me, well, who am I? I said, well, I'm living now a life where you are a light of the world. And I want to, people have said to me, you're passionate. I want that my passion to be the light. And a great learning lesson that I want from my experience with the job projections is they stoke my passion even greater, so that I want to be able to continue shining my light, so I can show people that don't sit on the sidelines, don't sulk, get out there, be who you are, shine that light, so that people can see the greatness in themselves, and we all win at the end.
I absolutely am delighted to hear you say that, Carl, because life is going to be full of challenges. And life, while we make plans, the universe shows up differently. And what is not meant for us is actually not there for us, because we are here for a higher calling, right? So, I want to pivot slightly and talk about how do you psychologically, spiritually, and emotionally navigate these apparent roadblocks, but it's because the world is evolving and world is going to a new place. You know, and I know from the classroom, there are less number of boys finishing high school, going into college, going into grad school. 70% is women. So women want other women to teach them, because men don't understand the journey of a woman. So there are a lot of societal shifts happening, and gender norms and the social construct is changing. But all of this requires the emotional, psychological, spiritual resiliency and the fortitude. I want you to take a moment and talk about how do you nurture that and where do you lean in, because that is where most men struggle, not the technical skills and capability part.
Right.
Navigating right now is, I don't look at yesterday, I don't look at what I don't have, I look at what I have. And I've been overwhelmingly blessed with so many gifts, whether it's been through employment, whether it's through how I express myself and or who I am. When it comes to my interactions, it's listen first. Be quick to listen, slow to speak. Once I listen, then I can share my personal experiences. And I had one last year with a student who came to me and apologized for how the student was behaving, because the student was 200 miles from home, and the student's parent was suffering from ALS. Well, I could relate to a similar experience as an undergraduate, where I was over 300 miles away from home and my father was dying from cancer. So the one point that I emphasize to the student is, the worst place you can sit is in your dorm room by yourself. Go out, talk to people. And one thing I emphasize, you always have a place here in this office. If you want to talk, find me. I'll just sit and listen, and I'll let you express yourself. And when it comes to dealing with women, I do a very similar approach. I had a situation this past spring where a student lost a grandparent and the student was suffering quite a bit. I actually had the student cry. I had to embrace the student because the student was crying because the student was that upset with, but it's being able to let students know that you have someone you can talk to. And I do say, if you need to yell at someone, that's okay, because I've been yelled at plenty of times in my life. I know I'm going to continue to get yelled at, so it's nothing new to me. I don't mind it. But I want students to be able to not keep it within them. And that's the real lesson that I want people to get from what I'm going through. And that's why I want to share this. And again, thank you for giving me this opportunity, because I know in listening to both you and Marquese, I hate to speak for you, but I would not be surprised that you've experienced that men are so afraid to admit that they have defeats or struggles in their life. It doesn't work, and I'm not going to let that happen. And I'm not ashamed to admit about the job rejection. I kind of laugh at them right now. I kind of admit it's kind of comical, but I know something great is going to come out of this. And if that means it doesn't affect me directly, but it helps someone navigate a difficult situation in one's life, I consider that even better than what I can receive. Because as I said earlier, I've been tremendously blessed. So for me, it's just making sure that I remember the blessings I have. I listen first and speak second, and create an environment where people are not afraid or ashamed to admit that something wrong or bad is happening in their lives. And I want to take the first step by admitting my quote unquote defeats, which I don't consider them, but nonetheless, they may be labeled as defeats. So people know that if I'm willing to share them and I'm not ashamed to do it, why don't I try and see where it takes me? Because we don't know where it's going to go, but that's the fun part of life.
Good. I appreciate you taking on the reality, like going back to that 15% earlier, that all of our success is outward. And when we're not experiencing it, we vanish. I have a relative now, they don't know how to cope with that. So thank you for creating space and reminding us it's okay, because it's part of the process, it's part of the journey of growth.
And Marquese, one thing I told students who have experienced difficulties with whether it's at home or at school, I tell them when they go out and they start listening to other students explain their situations, they're going to realize what they're experiencing is nothing in comparison to what other students experience. But more importantly, I tell the students, when you stay in your dorm room, all that negative energy stays in that room with you. When you get out, that negative energy disappears and the positive energy comes out. That's what brings out the recognition of how great you are and how you're going to be able to use what's great in you, which is another reason why I do these LinkedIn posts. So when students, and I tell them, when things get tough in your life, and you will, you've got the posts that I've done for you and the recommendations I've written for you. I wrote them so you know who you are. Go back to that, use that as your strength, and then you're going to find that whatever difficulty you're going through, you're going to get through it, and you're going to find something even greater than what you thought may have been great, but you didn't end up getting.
It's good. It's good. What you got, Doc? You're on mute.
I have absolutely enjoyed this conversation. And thank you so much, Professor Karl and Marquese, as always, to help showcase some of these real struggles.
Yeah.
And it is amazing how time after time in the Western tradition, we look at success or failure, we don't look at it as continuous improvement. And what I always tell myself, and the way we were taught in the East, and I would love to share this with our audience, every morning and every night when you turn on your light, look at the light bulb and think about it. It took Edison more than 1,000 attempts to get the light bulb. It didn't mean he made 1,000 mistakes. He learned 1,000 ways how not to make a light bulb till he perfected his vision, right? So if we can take a lesson from our everyday mindless task of turning on a light, how much more can we get out of life? And one practice I have done my whole life, and I recommend to everybody, every night after your dinner, take a walk. But when you take a walk, look up at the sky. Whether the moon is fully visible, totally invisible, or it's in different stages, it's still there. The moon is whole regardless of what we can see. And tell yourself, I am the moon. I go through cycles, and a whole of me is not always visible, but I am whole. And inside of me, I have everything to grow and show my totality of visibility. And that is a good self-reflective self-talk, so that we don't berate ourselves, but we see the power that's already in us. With that, I turn it over to you, Marquese, to bring this to a close, my friend.
Yeah, Carl, I really appreciate you're getting back to the core of things. We're so used to being functional in what we do and what we don't do. And you're bringing us back to who we are so that we can find our true gifts and talents and skills. I really believe that is the difference. Taking, as you talked about, accounting and bringing the humanity back to it. Ironically, I'm at a firm, a top 4 firm, literally right now, showing and having similar conversations because it's the distinction. And in this day and age, that much more. What are we bringing that adds the value? And you focus and harness that with your students as well as in your practice, and therefore everyone within your sphere and in the sound of your voice. Thank you. We're so glad to have you.
I thank both of you, and just Marquese, to build on what you just said, I've gotten to the point now where I tell students our very last class of the semester, the greatest lesson I've taught you this semester is who you are. Once you know who you are, whether you're creative, whether you're introverted, whether you're analytical, whether you're outgoing, whether you're expressive, whatever that personality trait is, that's what's going to take you to a learning experience at college, university, that is going to make the experience even greater. And it's going to put you in a place where you are to be, and that is being a light to the world.
It's good. It's good.
Thank you. On that note, Karl, with your message of asking every young and old person, whether you're man or woman, but especially for men who are going through struggles, remember, you are the light. The light is inside of you.
That's right.
And if you need somebody to talk to, you need somebody to reach out to, you know where to get a hold of us, and we will make sure you have access to Professor Karl as well.